Hello guys, how's it going? This is the Amateurist guy speaking to you live from Japan. Now, I know today is the 24th of May, Sunday, and I decided to take a video of myself from home because today is a bit rainy day, yeah? So, anyway, what I'm going to talk about today? Let's see. Today I want to joke about religions. Wait a minute, alright. That's an ultimate blasphemy. Forgive me. Anyway, you know, just just before we delve into joking though, right, and about religion, I'm going to get executed. Just kidding. I would like to share my story about religions because I'm no stranger of being involved in a religion. No, really, I'm telling the truth. Okay, well, let me tell you about this then. The time we are living in today. Let me begin with this, right? The kids, like the one you see in school nowadays, they're struggling, right? If not, they are being hurt the most. I kid you not, right? Because, for one, they're quintessentially aware of their parents' struggles, like being jobless, which is all too common nowadays. I'm here hearing many people being jobless and they have kids too. So, I'm sure how things are like, yeah? And as well as the similar hardships faced by their friends and their families. So they're not really strangers to these kind of problems, and they're a bit faint-hearted, you see, because they're kids, right? And there is only so much the faint-hearted can take, and worrying about their own futures, yeah, as well as their parents' quagmire. So, in fact, the reality for the kids nowadays is just continuous struggle and suffering, and as sad as that sounds. So, what I want to share with you today is that, the many religions that I have seen with my own eyes, right? And I believe that if God is truly righteous, not like cults, right? Righteous gods, right? And then all the gods from different religions, all forms of gods and from different religions are one. I'm quite sure of this because, now, especially in a time like today we're living in, it seems sort of tone deaf. I don't know if this is the right way of saying it, but yeah, well, yeah, well, I would say, let's say that it sounds like a tone deaf, right, of people to claim that they know God from what I would call a circumscribed perspective, like that of religious denominations, because I believe that the true God is boundless, like that of a universe, right? So they're not they don't sort of isolate you for being a different religious and from coming from different religion. I'm from religion A, you're from religion B, so we don't like each other. It doesn't work that way. It shouldn't work that way, and things should be boundless when it comes to religion, right? So that said, what I have to share today, well, for those of you who have been watching my videos in the past, thank you. You would know that I was born in Canada, and that is so in Midland in Ontario, in a bang spot. It's like minus 40 degrees Celsius during the winter. Anyway, and when my mother, when she was pregnant, that is before I was born, right? There were two large churches in a town, right? Unlike anything you would see in Japan, where I'm living in, since Canada as a Christian country, right? So we went to one of those churches, yeah, which was only about 5-minute walk from the apartment we were living in, to pray to Jesus for a healthy and a good child to be born. Yeah, so she's talking about me, yeah. Thank God. It's like, sorry. Anyway, after listening to various stories from the priest who was working there and made offerings and all that, and everybody sort of lined up to receive wafers, yeah, holy wafers before going home. Now, when it was my mother's turn to receive the wafer in her mouth, she said that she vividly remembers how deeply relieved she was. Yeah, well, I can sort of understand that. And from here, it becomes quite sad. I have to, it's going to be a sad story because there was another church, right, which is also large by comparison to Japan, and it was only 5-minute drive from where we were living, whose priest's son was involved in a tragic accident. And what was that? What actually happened? Now, what happened is that there was a place called the Little Lake. That's just a stone's throw away from that church. And one night, It was a 16-year-old son, all right, and his girlfriend, the priest's son. I mean, the 16-year-old son. He was the priest's son, and his girlfriend, who was also 16 at the time. That they were riding a snowmobile together over that frozen lake, and all of a sudden the ice gave way. And nobody knew what exactly had happened until the following day. Wow. Ain't that sad? And that night, yeah, after the accident, the church bells just rang continuously, if not forever. It just rang, and that day, just about everybody in Midland, where I was born, had joined their hands in prayer at the church. That was a sad story. And then fast forward 5 years, right? And I became 5 years old, right? And at home in Japan, my mother was a Buddhist, and as a Buddhist, she would recite two different kinds of complicated codexes, right? They're called sutras. And for my ancestors, which is in front of my family altar, called Butsudan, is the like the one you see, behind me. Yeah, that's Butsudan. And that is so without having the aid of the book. She could recite the whole thing, and it's really long and complicated. And at that time, I was merely 5 years old, and listening to those codexes almost every day, and I managed to sort of memorize one codex called the Heart Sutra or Hanya Shingo, like a song, right? And even though I didn't understand its meaning much, right? You can't blame me for that. I was only 5 years of age. So, at the time, when my mother's aunt passed away, we attended her funeral, and after returning from the temple where the funeral was held, and I recited the Heart Sutra, Hanya Shingo, right? Before everybody, and at the Butsudan, in which all the relatives gathered around me in surprise because I did it without the book. I did it without the aid of book. And they sort of felt it was a miracle or something, right? And be that as it may, though. And fast forward many years, and I visited a mosque in the Maldives, and I travelled there with my mum, one day, and there, I saw about 7 or 8 people, and all of them looking young, and lying down in a prostrate posture in prayer. After it's like once in a while they would sort of bend their bodies and stretch out again, and that sort of continued on for the rest of the prayers. And although it was my first time seeing their prayer, and I did not feel being a stranger. It was strange not to feel stranger. That's a funny way of saying. And actually, so without joke, the divine aura was definitely there. It's like I felt it on my skin, and what all this sums up to me is that whether you belong to the Christianity, Buddhism, Islam, or Hinduism, and I believe that they are never strangers to each other. Yeah, just like how I did not feel like felt like a stranger when I saw the Muslims for the first time, the Muslim prayer for the first time, and in fact they're all in one together. That is my that is how I feel actually, and it's quintessentially. And on the other hand, right, and if we sort of wage religious wars out of petty differences, right, is that because just like I said, you're from religion A, I'm from religion B, so we can't be together, etc., etc., and it can only lead to destruction, right? And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out, and I hope you can understand this. And so going back to the original sort of talk about the children, right? And so for the children of today, right, when you visit another country, there's nothing wrong with stigmatizing about showing respect to the local deity, right? And that does not sort of insult God or religion you believe in, and it shouldn't be the case. And every child, God is watching upon. Please believe in this, right? I believe in this too. And in fact, there isn't a single person who has missed out on that. So never ever indulge in wrongdoing just because nobody else is watching you, right? So much to God's disappointment, if that's the case. So if there is anything that adults can teach the kids today, they should keep this in mind at all the time. And, finally, my mother sort of told me that in a way of saying, this is in her way of saying, raising children is also about parents being raised, right? Or they learn to become parents. So therefore, the parents should protect their children for as long as they live and be infinitely grateful for their existence, lest we fall short from making up to the gods infinite provisioning. Thank you for your time. So I said I'm going to joke about religions, didn't I? And here's how it goes. Once upon a time, there was this priest who was making a serious announcement to the villagers. Right? He was saying, for those who committed stealing, he began saying, they should be buried with their hands left up from the ground. And all the villagers panicked. Right? They said, they were sort of hiding their hands. And then he continued. Right? Those who spoke of untruth, he continued, they should be buried with their tongues left out from the ground. And everybody just went hiding their tongues. But when he came to the point, and those who committed adultery, Father, said the young man at the back pew, if you're thinking what I'm thinking, the whole cemetery is going to look like an asparagus patch.